I plan to vote no tonight to the ordinance, and I want to explain why regarding amendments that I think are needed. But first, I also want to thank the members of the Planning Commission. You have volunteered countless hours for years for our borough, and I appreciate the years of work that went into this ordinance and the transparency with which you did that work. I would support a more scaled down historic district ordinance. So I want to be clear for the public, I voted yes last month to advertise this ordinance, but I've learned a lot in the past month from listening to residents' concerns. I listened to the entire 3.5-hour Planning Commission meeting. Some of you have now heard you speak twice. And I've read all of your emails. I've had conversations with several neighbors. I've listened. That's my job as an elected official. And I plan to change my vote because I think the historic district ordinance needs more work before we pass it. And that's the beauty of dialogue and deliberation and democracy. As you heard already, no, it's not possible to have a referendum or a ballot initiative on this issue for the citizens to vote. And I'm not sure I would support that anyway, because a ballot initiative to me often turns up as a win-lose proposition. And I'm more in favor of finding a way to strike a balance. So one thing that's become very clear to me, there's a big split on residents on this issue. Those in favor and those against. And even tonight, if I tallied the comments correctly, it seems like it was 12 for and 12 against. I don't know. I don't know if I tallied them correctly, but it was pretty evenly split. So there's a split between those who want to prevent tear downs using a historic district ordinance and preserve the architectural, makeup of our community, and those who don't want property owners' rights to be limited. And I believe that we can scale back the historic district ordinance to strike a better balance between those competing interests. That's the job of local government, to find compromises that work for our community. And I want to also thank the Planning Commission and council members for all the work that you've already done to scale back the historic district ordinance, because a lot of work has already been done on that, and I'm not sure if the members of the public are aware of that. So we've come very far, and I think we just have a little more work to do to pass a good historic district ordinance. And the residents who favor it, you've heard a lot tonight. It's because many people are opposed to tear downs. Every time, as council members, every time there's a tear down in our community or a potential for a tear down, we are flooded with emails from upset residents who are like, can't you do more to save Narberth, to protect Narberth? Everyone's tearing down our community. So the historic district ordinance is a tool to do just that. It would prevent Narberth from becoming a place, I believe, where only millionaires could afford to buy homes here. Even without the tear downs, we all know that the home prices have been skyrocketing in Narberth for years, even without the opportunistic tear downs by developers to build mansions. So one of my reasons for supporting it is it would keep Narberth a mixed income community, so working families like my own can still buy homes here. I think the historic district ordinance would also help with climate action and stormwater protection, because huge McMansions need more energy to heat and cool. The minimal green space that's left on these McMansion lots means less vegetation, worse flooding, which Narberth has problems with flooding, and severe storms are increasing with global warming. So McMansions could cause more water pollution in our watershed, as people have been complaining about with 3 Elmwood. I've also listened carefully to the residents who oppose the historic district because they're concerned about restrictions on what they can do with their own homes. To address their concerns, I believe we need to scale it back and make this historic district ordinance only apply to demolitions. So I have several amendment suggestions, and I don't know if you want me to do each one as a separate category that we then discuss, or do you want me to just throw everything out there? I only have a page and a half left to go.
Can I have the
Yeah.
I think it's very appropriate to share everything you have.
Okay.
Because this is a zoning ordinance, if we did, as a council, choose to include those amendments, we would need to re-advertise the ordinance.
Right.
Just so that everyone understands the process, but go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'm aware of that. Okay, so the first concern is inclusivity. An upset resident spoke to me personally, a man of color who lives in Narberth, about the historic district language, the ordinance language that makes our community sound unwelcoming to people of color. He made a very good point. I hadn't been reading it that way, so I'm glad he brought it up to me because I had only been reading the languages pertaining to the architecture. But when we use language like preserving the heritage or culture of a town that was overwhelmingly white and Christian pre-1945, and maybe it still is today, I'm not sure. I think I'm only one of 2 or 3 or maybe 4 people of color that were in this room tonight at all. It could sound to religious, ethnic, or racial minorities like they are not welcome here. And there's many places on the main line where for decades, Black and Jewish people couldn't buy homes due to both overt and systemic discrimination. So I understand that, from my understanding, our historic district ordinance language is based on Pennsylvania State Historic District Ordinance language. I understand that's why it's in there. But I think we need to ask ourselves why that language is there to begin with. Is that where the state ordinance is based on coded or veiled discrimination? So in Narberth, we value inclusivity and diversity. That language is front and center in our Narberth Comprehensive Plan and the Community Vision section. So we need to be really careful of using state ordinance language that conflicts with that vision. So perhaps some language is required by the state and we can't get rid of it, but we should push the boundaries on removing legislative language that will be read as exclusionary by people outside our community. There are several places in the ordinance where I believe we should remove the words culture and heritage and even some full lines that I would take out. I'm happy to share those at a later time, doesn't need to be tonight. And I also want to thank Maureen O'Leary for sharing your concerns about that as a resident tonight. Second, limiting the ordinance to demolition of buildings and porches. If our goal, and I know other people have other goals, not everyone's goal is just to prevent teardowns. A lot of people have commented on preserving the history, right? And that's important, that's very important too. But I think we should keep this ordinance just to, preventing demolitions and not restrict other things that homeowners can do, because it would create a financial burden on moderate income homeowners, which is not what we want to happen. Carl left, but if you're listening, Mr. Ackerman, I too am a public school teacher and I live in a teeny little twin on the best block in Narberth on Conway Ave. And so I would propose amending the certificates of appropriateness section to apply to only items 1, 2, and 6 and 7D on page 13. Which would mean only to knocking down main structures of the building and porches. I would take out the restrictions on removing towers, spires, cornices, railings, canopies, and changing the shape of the roof. So I think it's better to pass an ordinance with fewer restrictions and amend it later if we needed to add anything, rather than to pass an ordinance with too many restrictions and amend it later. Because I think, maybe it's my bias, I think it's often harder to get rid of existing regulations than to add to them. So the third issue is accessibility, which we've talked about a great deal, so I don't think I need to go into that a lot, but I would oppose anything that would just add 60 plus days onto someone's ability to get accessible ramps that, added to their home. So thank you, Mr. McConney and Evan Bound, for raising that issue, and we've already talked about it a lot, so I don't think we need to go into that more. Finally, I know that council members feel an urgency to pass the historic district ordinance tonight due to several recent developer teardowns of modest homes in the past year that were replaced with like $1 million+ McMansions. And I know there's a big concern that if we don't pass it tonight, several more developer demolitions will happen in the months it would take to get a revised version of the historic district ordinance passed. I don't believe we should rush through an ordinance that needs fixing due to fear of a few teardowns in the coming months. An ordinance that affects the rights of most property owners in the borough should be given more time for deliberation. And yes, this process has been happening for years, and the Planning Commission and Council have been working on this for years. But I believe we should welcome the recent upswell of public interest as an opportunity to engage residents in dialogue and find compromises. And also to continue to dispel misinformation, like in that flyer that was sent out, had some misinformation in it. So, as I tell my students, our democratic form of government was designed purposely to slow down government decision-making in order to maximize deliberation, for good reason. So I appreciate your point about that earlier, Dennis. I really appreciate your point. That was very poignant to me. We gave a developer an extension tonight. I believe that we should give the residents of Narberth an extension. And I think I've gotten to the end of my long speech. Thank you.